Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to read a post called "My girlfriend doesn't like giving blowjobs and it caused an argument." She's 24 and he's 22. The other night, me and my girlfriend were getting frisky. She starts giving me a blowjob. I really like blowjobs, who doesn't? A couple of minutes in, she goes, "Do you want to have sex?" And I say, "I'm really enjoying this blowjob," so she keeps going. Another couple of minutes in, she goes, "Are you sure you would rather do this than have sex?" And I say, "I'm enjoying this and it feels great, but we can if you want." She says, "I don't mind," and keeps going. Another couple of minutes in, she says, "I feel like I want to have sex, but you want a blowjob." And I say, "I think you're right," and she keeps going. I say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And she says, "I don't mind," and keeps going. We finish, start cuddling, and she says to me, "I feel a bit guilty that I don't give you many blowjobs because you eat me out so often." Don't get me wrong, I love eating her out. I love hearing her moan and making her feel good. I don't do it because I want something, I do it because I enjoy doing it. But I don't get a lot of blowjobs in return. Maybe a 1 to 8 kind of ratio. I don't expect them, but I like them. So I said, it would be nice if it happened more often. She got really upset with me. The next day, in brackets today, we went out to dinner and afterwards she started tearing up and telling me that she was angry with me, that it was awful that I'd say something like that it was really rude of me. She told me that if blowjobs were that important to me, I should go back to one of my whore-face ex-girlfriends. She said I was pressuring her because she doesn't like giving blowjobs. She's never told me that before. How was I meant to know? And it was awful that I made her keep going last night, even though I could tell she wasn't into it. I gave her multiple chances to say that she wanted to stop. I told her that I felt we should be able to talk and discuss things like that rather than get mad and have it turn into an argument. I said I didn't think it would upset her because if she said the equivalent to me, "You don't eat me out often enough," I'd take it as constructive feedback and do it more often, or just tell her that I didn't want to instead of getting angry. She ended up telling me that if I expect to get blowjobs in return for eating her out, which I've never said, then she doesn't want me to ever eat her out again. She also told me that she's decided she's only going to do it when she feels like it and not when I want it. Did I handle this poorly? Should I have not said that? Should I have done anything differently? I'm a little upset at the outcome, but I understand and respect it. I'm open to any feedback about the situation or any similar experiences. This is a very intimate conversation to have. My first thought is that a restaurant is not the appropriate venue. You shouldn't talk about something like this in public. They should have had this conversation in private. Having said that, there's a lot for us to talk about, so I'll take a short break and then we'll get into the analysis. I think the most important part of this discussion will center around why this turned into an argument and what could have been done, if anything, to prevent it, as well as an examination of the psychological motivations that both people had. However, I'm going to save that discussion for the end because there's something far more important that we need to talk about first, which are the numerous red flags that have been demonstrated in this situation that indicate that this woman is not a safe person to be in a relationship with. If you're dating a girl and you spot one of these red flags, you should take a moment and seriously consider whether or not you want to continue on with that relationship, if it's even safe. The consequences of ignoring a red flag when you spot it can be quite simple and straightforward. You just have an unenjoyable relationship, but they can also be a lot more serious. Let's have a look at some of the red flags that I spotted in this story. Now, this guy's young, he's only 22 years old, and so I don't necessarily expect him to know this yet, but for future reference, if a woman is giving you a blowjob and she asks, "Do you want to have sex?" what she means is, "I would like to stop giving you a blowjob and I would like to move on to sex." It's reasonably obvious, as someone just looking onto this situation, that she wanted to move the sexual interaction away from the blowjob and onto sex. And for whatever reason, he didn't pick up on it. Perhaps he was just too blissed out. That can happen. That said, he had enough wits about him to ask, "Would you like to stop and move on to sex?" To which she replied, "I don't mind." Here's where the red flag comes in, because later on she says, "I don't like giving blowjobs," and she says it in such a manner that indicates that she expects him to know that. She also said that he made her keep going. Massive red flag. So long as we assume that he's portraying the events accurately, her expectation that he be a mind reader and know what she wants to do even when she doesn't speak her intentions out loud is utterly ridiculous. He gave her the opportunity to stop and she said that she didn't mind. At that point, she's taken responsibility for continuing. He isn't a mind reader. Nobody is. If she says that she's happy to continue, then he should take her at her word. And if she's unhappy, well, that's her responsibility. Instead, she wants to play the victim. For her to later claim that she was pressured or that he made her keep going is extremely concerning. It's indicative of somebody who's not in touch with reality, with what actually occurred, truth and fact. It's somebody who's comfortable changing historical events based on how they're feeling in the moment. Who knows what she's going to claim in the future? If she's not grounded by facts and reality, she could make up anything. In the context of the Me Too movement and all these claims of sexually inappropriate behavior, I honestly don't think that it's safe to be in a relationship with a woman comfortable making these kind of accusations. The very first time that she starts to rewrite history, painting you as some kind of a rapist, you need to be extremely cautious and take steps to protect yourself. False accusations happen every day, and they completely ruin lives. As always, prevention is the best cure, which is why I would never recommend being sexually intimate with somebody who you don't completely trust. By her actions, she's proven herself to be untrustworthy. You could be innocently making love, only to find out that years later she considered that scenario as you forcing her to have sex. Scary stuff. This red flag isn't as serious, but I still consider it something worth noting when she says that she's only going to give blowjobs when she wants, not when he wants them. In a healthy relationship, these two things should be synonymous. He's happy receiving pleasure, and you're happy because you like seeing him happy. And of course, vice versa. When your relationship moves into the territory of arguing and competing over who gives and who receives more, then the relationship is basically over. At that point, there's no trust, there's no goodwill, and there's no generosity. He has the right idea when he says that he performs oral sex without expecting anything in return. Someone who really loves you will be happy just to make you happy. So the fact that she's drawn a line in the sand like this does not bode well for the future of their relationship. They're still young, and they're not even married yet. So you can imagine how much worse it's going to get years on down the line if she's already so rigid regarding sexual generosity. These are the reasons why I thought that it was important to point out the red flags even before we got onto the analysis. A woman displaying this kind of behavior is not really safe to be in a relationship with. I'd recommend moving on and finding a higher quality woman, someone who's more generous and somebody who's more in touch with reality. So now that we've covered the red flags, I want to move on to the analysis. I'll take a short break and then we'll continue. Let's start with how he's feeling. Reading between the lines, it's reasonably clear that he would like her to be more generous and to give him blowjobs more often. That's understandable. They're great. But of course, it does significantly reduce your pleasure if the other person makes it feel like they're performing some unpleasant chore. Perhaps contributing to the discomfort that he's feeling in this situation is the fact that he goes down on her far more often, at a ratio of about 8-1. That ratio is way off. And it is concerning that she's not more sexually generous. I think it's definitely worthy of having a discussion, though I certainly wouldn't do it in a restaurant, in a public place. But yeah, once you're in private, I think it's something you should talk about. Having said that, if he expects that he's going to find himself in a relationship with a completely equal ratio of performing and receiving oral sex, I think he's in for a rude shock. I have never spoken to anybody who's described a relationship dynamic where a woman is more generous than the man in giving oral sex. I think that the reason for this is that physically, it probably takes less effort to go down on a woman than the other way around. In addition to that, men are probably just more used to having to be generous in order for them to receive what they want sexually. For women, sex is so readily available that the idea that they would have to put in a lot of effort or hard work in order to get what they want is quite foreign to them. Women can try and empathize with what it's like to be a man, but honestly, the two genders have such a radically different experience of the availability of sex that a woman can't really know what it's like to be in a man's shoes. Lots of guys would be so thrilled to receive a blowjob that they would happily go down on a woman 8 times just to earn one. So my advice to this guy would be to talk to his girlfriend about the ratio, because 8-1 is definitely not fair, but also to temper his expectations, because I don't really think it matters what girl he's with. He's not going to find a perfect ratio that's completely equal. Now, as I say all of that, I know that there's going to be a bunch of people in the comments section, you can check for yourself right now, scroll down, have a look, who say that their girlfriends give blowjobs far more often than they perform oral sex. I don't really have much to say to those people except, awesome. That's great. Good for you, brother. It sounds like you're onto a good thing. I really recommend that you appreciate it, because even though that's your experience, I don't think it's going to be universal, and the next woman that you're with might not be so generous. Unless, of course, you're some super high-value alpha male who women are just constantly giving blowjobs to in order to keep you interested in them. In which case, just, ignore everything I'm saying, because it sounds like you've got it figured out. My ultimate point is that women who perform oral sex more often than they receive it are the exception. Now, coming back to the story of this young couple, I think one of the most interesting things that he revealed is that she said that she felt guilty about how few blowjobs she was giving. What's fascinating is watching her progression, because at one point she was feeling guilty, but by the time they reached dinner the next day, that guilt had transformed into anger and blame. This is a classic case of projection. She's got this unpleasant feeling inside herself, in this case, guilt over her sexual selfishness. However, she's not ready to face this feeling. It's too much for her, and so she tries to create some distance by blaming the boyfriend as if he's the cause of this negative feeling. Almost everybody does this from time to time. Taking responsibility for your own emotions and not blaming your partner can be surprisingly difficult when you're feeling defensive, and everybody slips up from time to time. However, if it's happening a lot and your partner never takes responsibility for their emotions, well, that's another red flag, and at that point I would recommend moving on to somebody else. If it only happens every now and then, and you're generally able to work through it, have some discussions about it, and they're ultimately able to see where they went wrong, then it sucks that that kind of thing happens, but just chalk it up to one of those difficulties that's necessary if you're going to have relationships with people. Now, in order to deal with somebody who's in the midst of projection and who's not taking responsibility for their emotions, you have to be pretty zen and not allow your ego to get caught up in the drama. When she's making these horrible accusations, saying that you pressured her to continue and that you should go back to your whore-face ex-girlfriends, what you want to do is ignore the words that she's saying. Obviously, she's just throwing out hurtful comments and she isn't thinking rationally. That's why you need to ignore the words and instead focus on the emotion. Don't respond to her accusations, but instead listen to what she's communicating. It's obvious in this situation that she's feeling hurt, scared, and insecure. We don't know why this is. It could be that she's just feeling guilty about how selfish a lover she is, or she could be triggered from some kind of past sexual abuse involving having to give blowjobs or something like that. We don't know. But you won't get anywhere if you get bogged down in the content of her words, because that's not what she's really trying to communicate. She's in pain, and that's what she wants you to know. Saying this isn't to excuse her behavior in any way. I think she acted appallingly. But just assigning blame isn't enough. We need to analyze the situation so we know how to navigate it better next time. Like he said, he would have liked it just to be a discussion. It didn't really need to be an argument. It's very common though. People don't like to express pain and vulnerability, so they mask it with anger and blame. If you can break through the outer layers and get to the real core of what she's feeling, that's where you've got some hope for some resolution. Of course, in order to do that, you would need to have the patience of a saint and a really strong sense of self so that your ego doesn't get caught up in the drama of all the accusations that she's making. So I'm not saying that it's easy or even that he's morally obligated to do this, but I always think, why not develop these skills? It's great self-improvement and it'll make your life way better. The easiest way that he could have avoided this whole argument would have been to give a different response when she told him that she felt guilty about how few blowjobs she gives him. She was feeling insecure at that moment, and so what he should have done was kept the conversation about her, made her feel safe so that she could open up further. Who knows what he would have found out if he'd been able to stay compassionate and ask supportive questions. Maybe she's feeling insecure about her technique, or she has some specific psychological hang-up about this particular act. This could have been an opportunity for the two of them to get closer. I'm not blaming this situation on him. When he said, "It would be nice if it happened more often," he was accurately and honestly communicating his thoughts and feelings. So while I don't blame him at all, it also doesn't surprise me that this turned into an argument. When she said that she was feeling guilty, she was being vulnerable at that moment, and his response could easily be interpreted as criticism. He said, "It would be nice if this happened more often," but what she heard is, "Yes, you should feel guilty because you should do it way more." So instead of creating a dynamic where the two of them feel like they're on the same team, she now sees him as a threat and they start competing. The consequences are predictable and the rest is history. If his ultimate goal was to receive more blowjobs, then it seems like he's failed in his task. So there you have it. I don't think that he did anything morally wrong, and I do think that her behavior is pretty appalling. If he wants to avoid these situations in the future, perhaps he needs to find a different woman, someone who's more sexually generous, or just get better at reading female cues so that it doesn't devolve into an argument. Yes, it sort of sucks that men have to do all this kind of guesswork and interpretation, and perhaps in an ideal world, women would communicate a lot more like men, just sort of say what they mean, be sort of straightforward and logical about it. That's not reality though. Women have a different way of communicating, And I think at its core, what the red pill is really about is educating men about how women think, how they communicate, so that you can more successfully navigate your interactions with them. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment below letting us know what you thought of this situation. Also, be sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already done so, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I really enjoy making videos like this that discuss the most intimate parts of people's relationship. You know, things that have to do with sex, because I don't find that it's a topic that's covered very often in the public sphere. Unfortunately, due to community guidelines or some other reason, when I do make videos like this, they tend to get demonetized because YouTube doesn't want to be a platform that's, you know, all about sex. At the time of filming this, I have no idea if this video has ads on it or not. I really hope that it does. But in any case, if you want to see content like this and not have me censor myself or avoid certain topics, then it would really help me out a lot if you could check out my Patreon page. That's where my most loyal supporters are hanging out. That's where I interact with people. There's a link in the description box below. Please click it, check out what's on offer. It'll be helping me out a lot. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you again next time.